cut it at that time, the colder your food will get. So probably not. But I think I've talked with everybody, we can get this done. So we'll probably do one talk followed by another one. Remember a few minutes ago when I said there's only 2 speakers? That was a test, because really there's 3. I'm disappointed that none of you guys called me on that. But everything will be okay. All right, so coming up now is the illustrious Ghent for Puppet Labs, the best out of the Northwest.
Not quite yet.
Representing Portland, Oregon, the hometown hero. Almost. All right, here we go.
All right. So I'll try to make this quick so it can eat. The slides are available at this URL. I suggest you download them while I'm talking. Don't pay attention. The speaker notes are on the slides as well. My slides are pretty terse, so if you'd like to read along, the speaker notes are there. Also, I might defer questions on this since we're running a little short on time. So I've got a Google moderator site already set up. During the talk, if you have questions, just bring that webpage up and then type in any questions you have. If we run out of time, I can answer those offline. So you might want to maybe drop your email address in there or some way to contact me with the questions. And then other people can vote on them as well. There's another link for the slides. All right, so what I'm going to talk about is a recent compliance project and initiative we did at my previous job at NetSmart Technologies. I just started a couple labs in early May, and I was at NetSmart for about 2 years before that. We're a healthcare company. We make software for behavioral health and drug addiction. And our sales team is wonderful. They sold a product that we didn't have. So they said to the state of Washington that we are completely compliant with SAS 70 Type 2, and by the contract.
I think it's important that you also mention that you've been using Puppet for a long time and we're really critical from the early macOS support.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Just skip all that.
Okay, I'm not going to skip all that. So to finish up the compliance stuff, yeah, this was, we'll move backwards through time. Puppet was a really key piece of making this project a success in a 6-month time frame. Most people take a couple of years on SAS 70. Before NetSmart, I worked at the math department at the university. I met Luke at the LISA conference, I think in 2006, or actually 2004 was the first one I met Luke. Started using Puppet late 2005, early 2006, and we were using CF Engine at the time at the math department. All the Macintosh machines were managed by CF Engine. I had about 170 workstations, and we had over 100 packages that we needed to deploy. I wrote this ridiculously ugly full script that was actually downloading packages off an Apache web server and installing them and checking them out. It was terrible. So I saw Luke's article in Login magazine, talked to him at Lisa, and then he helped me make some modifications to Puppet early on. It really introduced a lot of the macOS 10 support, so I definitely couldn't have done it without his help. And that's really what turned me on to Puppet is the community involvement, the IRC channel, the mailing list, working with everybody at Luke and Bryce, and everybody here as well. So, yeah, that's sort of my background. I've been using Puppet for a long time, almost 5 years now, I think. And then we also, at NetSmart, so at the math department it was macOS 10. At NetSmart we're primarily a Red Hat and Solaris shop. So it's more of a typical web application. So I've sort of got experience on all 3 of the major Unix platforms. All right. So this talk is about using Puppet as a technical solution to carry the brunt of the work for audits. When we were going through the SAS 70, I realized that I needed something, otherwise I was going to be drowning in paperwork. A lot of auditing and compliance has to deal with the process, and then the process, you need to make sure that you're following it. But as people, we're going to make mistakes. So the auditors are okay with mistakes as long as you at least have a documented way and a reliable way to understand that the process wasn't followed. And then somebody to blame, say, that guy didn't follow the process, yeah, we talked to him about it, this is the remediation that we went through. So that combined with, as I used Puppet and developed or deployed it on all of our machines, we achieved full automation. So we have incredible agility and the ability to make changes really rapidly. So my concern with the SAS 70 audits that we were going through was that they would be a barrier to the agility that I had already achieved with these tools, Puppet in particular. So this talk is going to address two major points. The system state, the state of our machines is going to change over time. That's a fact of life. Things are going to be restarted. We're going to update configuration files. You can think of that as the Puppet agent running on the machine, making its changes and doing its work. Separately from that, we've got the Puppet master configuration itself, and that's usually stored in version control. That's going to change. These two things are changing separately from each other through time. And the log files that we have, the audit trails in both, aren't linked together. So the commit history in the version control system and the logs in Puppet have no correlation. So what I'm going to show you is a way to correlate, a way to use Splunk and then a couple slight modifications to Puppet to get the event logs that Puppet is giving you directly correlated to your commit history. And that will give you somebody to blame, which is really nice for the auditors. So I don't think I need to tell everybody, there are lots and lots of regulations and compliance issues. PCI is one, SAS 70 in the United States we have HIPAA, IPA, which I forget what that stands for. So most of these are United States based, but I'm sure in Europe there are quite a few compliance concerns as well.
Just a quick show of hands, in Europe who's involved with regulation?
Yeah, who has to deal with this in some form or another? All right, so roughly a third to a half. If you don't, when you do, which there's a good chance you might, usually it has to happen very quickly, which is what I found was really difficult to deal with. We had a contract that we had to deliver. We had to be compliant in 6 months. So hopefully, even if this isn't an issue for you right now, maybe, so keep this in mind. I think initially being compliant is easy, right? You just build one machine that is compliant and then clone it a whole bunch of times. So here we've got Star Wars. This guy's a gold master, and then make a bunch of clones of them. The trouble is, this does not work for longer than about 5 minutes, because you're going to need to change them, right? And as soon as you change one of those clones, it's no longer a clone. You're going to need to put out your fires. People are people, so the best procedures that you have, they're not going to be followed. You're going to need to justify the changes that you make when you're doing your audits. You can't just be logging in and making changes. Auditors like to see that tied back to some business case for some reason. That's going to be difficult. People are going to forget to write down the ticket number or the reason they actually logged in and made a change to the SSH configuration. There's going to be fires. The database is going to be slow. You need to log in and fix that in real time. So change is inevitable. There's going to be a drift in the state of the machine, so we can't just use clones. We're going to need to do something else with the configuration management tool. The big problem is time, right? So the auditors are going to come in, they're going to say, show me your records that 6 months ago your processes were followed. They're not necessarily saying, show me everything was perfect. They're just more or less showing, show me that your processes were followed, whatever those processes are. And if they weren't, you know about it. So you're going to be having to dig through your log files and your records. You know, it's pretty easy to do that right now. Like you can just look at the Puppet Master, see what version of Git or subversion or CDS help you is checked out in the Puppet Master, and then compare that to the log files, the event logs that you're getting right now. But then last week, you know, how do you know what version of Git or subversion was present on the Puppet Master? You know, maybe you've got some change control policies so that you only update the Puppet Master once a week, so you can get a pretty good idea. But then that becomes more difficult last year. You know, so what version of the subversion repository was on the Puppet Master a year ago? It's very difficult to answer. You know, the Puppet logs may show you a year ago that you were out of compliance, like maybe the network time server got restarted, and if you're under PCI, you know, your clocks have to be in sync at all time. So if your network time server wasn't running for an hour, you don't necessarily have that guarantee, but you have to know at least that Puppet started it. So it's difficult because we don't have this link between the version control that Puppet has, the repository, and the event logs that Puppet is giving us. So again, talking about, I was going to have notes to myself here.
You gotta get some quote now.
Oh yeah, no, don't do very long impressions. You know, the tools that we have allow us to make changes really fast. So the process can't get in our way for that. Puppet and Git, you know, we're making multiple changes to the systems per day now, and in some cases, large organizations are making multiple changes per hour. I think Amazon's commit window at this point, or change control windows, every hour they push to production. So we've got two major issues to overcome. It's when an administrator makes a change to a revision control system, that can propagate out to all the systems that you manage. So small, possibly innocuous change could be catastrophic. And we have the issue of time, you know, which I've mentioned a couple of times now. We've got this disconnect between the event logs in Puppet D and the state of the repository. So propagation, I'm not going to solve this problem, but what I'm going to show you is a way that you can at least backtrack. So if you are in a mode where somebody made a typo and that's bringing down your entire web farm, you can at least track back very quickly to the commit that caused that. And even down to the line and the file in Puppet that caused that. And then for time, we're going to link Puppet D event logs to the commit history. All right, so this is a nice little graphic of a volcano in Iceland. Causes major issues across the continent. So, you know, a single commit, which may be small, can have a huge effect when you're talking about 10,000 machines. And then, you know, you got your auditors asking them questions about time. And they're usually not very specific. They're just like, a year ago, between April and May, show me that you're good. Which is a really difficult question to answer. All right, so what we're going to do is the logs that Puppet produces and the commits that we make to Git right now are completely disconnected. And we're going to link them together. And Splunk is going to be used as a helping tool to give us reports on that. All right, so the thing that's missing right now is this configuration version option. This was recently added in 0.25.0.1, I believe. And what this allows you to do, so if you've noticed when you're running Puppet on more recent versions, the first thing it says is applying configuration version, and it gives you some number. That number is based on time, I think it's epoch. So you can alter that. You can make that string applying configuration version whatever you want. We can make that any arbitrary string that we give it. And the way we can do that is give it a script or a program. And the Puppet master will execute this immediately before compiling any catalog. So when a client connects to the server, says, Steve, please give me my catalog, here's all my facts. The first thing the Puppet Master will do will execute the script, then compile the catalog, and give the client that version number. So the script for us is just going to look at the most recent commit in the repository that the Puppet Master is using. So then this provides a link here, some sample output of the script. So it's going to say, I'm currently looking at branch Jeff. You know, it might be branch production, branch testing, branch development, and the current commit is the SHA identifier, which is globally unique. And so this will be in the log message in Puppet of every single event that Puppet creates. So we know when Puppet says it's restarting the NTP server, it came from this exact state of the repository. So a year from now, we know exactly what the Puppet manifest looked like when the NTP server restarted, which is pretty cool. The second thing we need to do is use a special report processor. And you know, the first presentation that we had, Luke mentioned reporting is going to get a lot of overhaul in 2.6, and this will actually be a little bit easier. But the report processor that I modified here is like 3 lines. So I took the log report processor that's already present in Puppet and just added 3 lines. You can actually reduce it down to adding 1 line if you want. So it's really straightforward if you want to do this. Okay, this is the script that gets executed every single time the Puppet Master compiles a catalog. So all it's going to do here is get the reference of the current state of the repository. So if you're unfamiliar with Git, this would just be doing like a subversion, I think, status, or subversion log, and getting the most recent identifier of the commit history. And then here, we're just getting the SHA identifier, so that globally identifies the commit. It's a pretty lightweight program, right? I mean, that's it, and then we echo it out. And we're echoing it in a key value pair, so it's key equals and then some string. This is helpful to Splunk. Splunk automatically parses things on an equal sign, so we'll get field equals the value. And that'll really help us with reporting when we look at that. So that's it for the thing to get the version that we want. This is the custom report processor. So a report processor, how many people are familiar with the way Puppet Master does reporting? Can do it? Okay. We covered this in the training class, and we didn't cover it in the Puppet 101 session yesterday, but the gist of it is that the Puppet D, the Puppet agent, when it's done with a catalog run, you have the option to upload all of its log messages to the server, and then the server can process it in different ways. So that's what this is. This is just another way to process all the log messages on the Puppet agent. If you don't have central syslog, if you don't have central, some form of log, this is a good way to do it. And in fact, for compliance, I recommend this over syslog, because Puppet will upload this through the SSL channel, and syslog by default uses UDP, which some auditors don't like. So it's unreliable, and we're expecting this. We're sort of basing our audits on these messages. So the things in italics here are what I've added to the default log processor that ships with Puppet. All we're doing, this config version script here, --config version, when it executes this, Puppet Master will take the output here and stick it into every single log message into this version attribute. So by default, it doesn't actually show it to you. So I'm just appending the log version to the log message. And probably need to talk with Marcus a little bit later, because I'm probably doing this very poorly, but it works. So if this is your only log processor, you could get away with saving a message or something. All right, can you guys read that okay? Okay, great. I was having trouble with it. This is what a Puppet log message looks like out of the box. So you can see Puppet is restarting the NTP service, but we have no idea why. Like, what part of the manifest caused this? What module caused it? What did the repository look like? There's no context here. So with the log processor log version that I added, we get a whole bunch more stuff. So it's the same message first. NTP, service NTP triggering refresh, so it's restarting the NTP service. Except now we're getting event time. So I should say, this message, I've added more fields than just that version. That the log message actually has a bunch of other information. So mine, I sort of extended a little bit further. But here, in the log message, we're getting the event time as Puppet agent reported it, not as it was actually logged to syslog. Those are different, so it's important to grab that. We're getting the manifest that it came from, the line number that it came from. So we know that service NTP, there's a resource declaration at init.pp line 32 that we can go look at. And we've got the commit ID. So now we know the state of the repository in time, the file that this resource came from, and the line number. So we can drill down and figure out what happened. Splunk automatically parses this stuff out into fields for us, which is really good for reporting, which I'll show you that in a second. All right, so if you have a ticketing system, or you've got like a web-based browser for your, a web-based interface for your version control, you can just bring this straight up here, and this isn't actually init.pp, but you could bring up the exact file that was in that log message, go straight to the line number and say, oh, the last person to modify this file in this line was Jeff. Let's go talk to Jeff and figure out what the heck he did. All right, so now I'm going to show it here. How are we doing on that? All right. So here on the bottom of the screen, you guys read that in the back? All right. I'm using the standard log report processor on the Puppet master. And I'm not running this in the foreground because if you run Puppet master in the foreground, it won't log to syslog. When you do well, I'm sorry, not the foreground. If you do verbose logging, verbose output, you'll only see the messages on the screen, they won't go to syslog. I want them to go to syslog because Splunk is going to pick them up. All right, so right now, the network time server is turned off, which means we're out of compliance. So if we just run Puppet agent, it's going to fix that. So it went ahead and replaced the NTP configuration file. That triggered a refresh of the service. And there are a couple other changes. But if we go over here to Splunk, let's look at stock logs. How many people are using Splunk right now? Not too many, okay. If you're relatively small, I think it's free up to 500 megs per day of data. It's actually, it's really cool too. I hear it's expensive, but so you can see here. Oh, by the way, this whole talk doesn't require Splunk. It just really helps with the reporting. So you can still do, tying of the commits to the event logs. You don't need Splunk for this. It's just convenient. We're not getting any context, so that 9:23, my clock is still off. NTP hasn't been running. So let's go ahead and reset this back. So NTP is turned off again, and now we're going to turn on my log processor. So instead of doing log, I've got log version, and this is just a Ruby file in the standard Ruby lib directory inside of Puppet. I'll show you that at the end. Okay, so let's go and start the Puppet master back up. We're on Puppet now. Yeah, sorry. I was about to say, I'm not getting my version. Okay. So you won't see all of those key value pairs on the Puppet agent. That's okay. It's the Puppet master that's appending those key value pairs to the log message. So now over here, if we look at the resources with a commit ID, so this is just a pretty simple search. We're looking at daemon.log. It's got the resource attribute, resource key, and it's got a commit key. Again, my clock is a little bit off. It's about 2 hours off. So right here, we got service restarted, configuration file changed, and we have the actual globally unique commit ID. So that gets us most of the way there, but you know, what if we actually wanted to look at the file? Let's get from. So what I'm going to do here, I need to turn on my internet. And then what we can do, you can have Splunk compile interesting fields for you based on, so here we've already got the full path in the manifest. This is relative to the Git directory, so if we just chop off demo Puppet demo tools, then we've got the relative path to the file, we got the line number. We can replace that with a URL to GitHub, and we can cram in the commit SHA identifier and construct a full URL. So what that looks like is this. So now, you know, if somebody comes to you and said, tell me 12 months ago if your network time server ever restarted, and if so, why? You just have to run this little report here. But this is a Splunk search. And then down here, you know, so you can say, okay, well at 9:25, it did restart, and the actual URL, so if we look at this in table view, you know, this is the commit, you can do a sort by that. These are the resources that were changed. Here, the contents of ntp.conf got changed. The checksum obviously changed because contents changed. The service, since it's ensured, that means that the service was stopped and we ensured that it should be running. And then now we're actually getting the line number and the full path to the manifest. And then in Splunk, I've done a little bit of evaluation here to generate this commit URL. So you can see it's prefixing it with HTTP GitHub Jetpack, then it concatenates the commit ID, then it concatenates the relative path. So if we copy that and paste it over here, hopefully this works. Okay. We can scroll down to line 32, and that's where the resource ends and the resource begins. Can you see that up there? You can make that over here. Okay. That's pretty much it.
Seems a method to fire people faster.
What's that?
Seems a method to fire people faster.
Yeah, right. So, and this is what, you know, we were talking with Marcus yesterday. you know, if you make a change, or like if somebody makes a mistake with Puppet, you know, I think Nigel made a really interesting comment, because he works at Google and he runs Puppet, right? So he said, Puppet has enabled me to F up on a massive scale. So, you know, before, you know, you make a typo, you affect maybe one or two machines, but with Puppet, you have the possibility, you have the potential to impact tens of thousands of machines, but it's not Puppet's fault, right? I mean, it's still a human error. So you still have to do your testing, you still have to do all the normal tools we do. Puppet is just, you know, like it's giving us the power to manage 10,000 machines, it also gives us the power to mismanage 10,000 machines. Now here, we're able to link this back and say, okay, well, why did that service restart? Why did our entire work farm come down? Well, let's look at the repository. If you have development and testing environments, you can get these commit messages will show up in multiple environments. You also have this ref, right? This reference. Why did I not include that? Here. So, you know, you could easily have a development, testing, and production branch. So you could say, okay, well, I have a commit. Was the commit tested? Yes or no? You know, if you have a commit that's only in the production branch, the procedures that you have, the process probably wasn't followed, and that was somebody's fault. So whoever activated that commit in the production branch probably skipped a step. You need to talk to them. Similarly, if you push a commit to the testing branch and it blows up on all your systems, you can easily trace that back and say, okay, well, it's commit blah that caused the entire test infrastructure to fall over. Yeah, question?
Could we log the root notification, because finding that the NTP service has been restarted by the manifest, we said we need to restart the NTP service.
Yes.
It's cool, but in fact, in the real deployment and real error, we have file modification, a notification, and the service restart. And we need to find why this service is restarted.
Well, okay, right. So there are a couple options there. I did not run this first in no-op mode. You would still get these commit messages ahead of time in no-op. That's gonna, I mean, Puppet will tell you in that instance that it's going to restart the service. You know, I struggled with this question too. Like, how do you actually know what the root cause is? There's still some investigation that needs to be done, I think. I did struggle with how to, you know, I think that's the silver bullet, right? Like, if you could just completely automate away the question of why did my infrastructure break? That would be pretty cool. I think we'd be pretty rich at that point. So this is, I view this more as like leaving yourself breadcrumbs so that if things do break, you have an easy way to backtrack all the way through. You know, without this, if things break, it's difficult to correlate, right? You can't really see what the state of the repository was. So yeah, I mean, there still needs to be some investigation. If anybody else has any suggestions for that, I am totally all ears.
I mean, you can certainly consolidate log messages from other systems that would help you kind of triangulate where the fuck up happened.
Right.
Like if you had a monitoring system outputting data into Splunk that said, if you looked at login logs, SSH logs, you're like, okay, 2 minutes prior to my monitoring system said NTP went down at this point.
Right.
30 seconds prior, this guy logged in, you know, or something
Right.
like that.
Or your disk filled up. Or the Splunk is actually pretty good about trending. So you know, I think it's an interesting approach because they just run giant searches over everything. It's a little bit different than most of the monitoring. But.
In Splunk, there is a transaction.
So you can
follow transaction.
Yes.
In fact, in Puppet, if the notification mechanism in Puppet could create a unique ID for when a file change and there is several resources which are notified by this event. In the log, Puppet could log a unique ID for this trigger, and in Splunk, I can't find.
Yeah, I think I know where you're getting at, and like maybe Marcus in 2.6, do you know if we'll be able to add attributes to the reporting that says like these are the relationships between the resources we're managing?
No.
Okay. I'll file it as a feature request.
Okay.
But we'll be adding, I mean, one of our goals is to very soon have a copy of every host catalog right next to each report. So you'll have the relationship information in the catalog, which you can use when correlating with the report to figure that out.
Right. And Splunk is actually pretty good about doing external lookups for correlation. You know, the demo that I did here is pretty quick and straightforward. Now we're getting into pretty advanced Splunk stuff. But if you need to do that sort of thing for compliance, you know, definitely investigate that because I think it's possible. I just don't think it's trivial. This was pretty trivial, I think. You know, it's one line modification to a report processor, 2-line shell script, and a couple Splunk servers. So, you know, what I'd like to do going forward. If you would like to reproduce this, here are the quick steps to do it. There's the Puppet Demo Tools GitHub repository. You can clone that. You can fork it and clone it, no problem. You can just put log version.rb into userlib ruby site ruby 1.8. You need to set the config version parameter. You can do that in the puppet.conf or on the command line. Sorry. You need to set reports. You need to tell it to use your custom log version report rather than just the log. The store is optional. I like to do that just so I get a complete copy of the YAML file. And then by default on a Red Hat system, I think syslog does not catch all the messages that Puppet do. So just make sure that you've got daemon.star. And then if you're using Splunk, make sure that Splunk is looking at syslog. So that's here. And then also keep in mind, this sort of trips me up a little bit, if you run Puppet master with -- verbose, messages are not sent to syslog.
Would that have verbose and no demonize, or?
I've only done it with no demonize.
Right.
I don't know.
So no demonize, it goes to the console. So it's not the verbose, it's the no demonize.
Well, but if I run no demonize without verbose, it sends it to syslog.
It shouldn't. I think it says at the console.
We just saw it, so
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Bug.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a bug. All right, right to the back. So the future. What I've done here is linked the event messages as you see them in your log files to the commit history of your version control system. I think we can take it one step further. If you do a commit hook in Git or Subversion, you could say, you know, parse the commit message, make sure that they've given you a ticket number. If they haven't given you a ticket number, don't accept the commit. That enforces and is a pretty strong statement to the auditors. Look, I've got a full trail. I can take you all the way back to the business case, to the ticket number that documents the motivation for why I made this change. That I can show you the change I made in version control, and then I can show you the results of that change in the Puppet logs. And I can go forward and backwards, which is pretty cool. I think Splunk could also form URLs to that ticket number, so that you can just, you know, generate a nice little report, tell people to click on the URL, and you're really freeing up your own time, right? You can just run this Splunk report, hand it to the auditor, say, look, if you've got questions, go here to this URL. If you want to see the code, go to that URL, and then here's the logs for the changes. And that closes the loop. You know, it goes from the business case, the motivation, why the change needed to be made, it's documented in your ticketing system, to the change that was actually made in the Puppet manifest, to the change that was actually made on the system by Puppet, forward and backwards. And then, of course, we're in Belgium, so I'm gonna drink some beer. All right. I wonder if we have any questions. How we doing on timing? All right. So, yeah. While I bring up, go ahead, Marcus.
So one question on the tying things back to business case. That works for changes where Puppet made a change based on a change in the manifest. But what about where somebody goes in with SSH, changes the system, and Puppet reverts their change?
I think it's interesting because it's still tied to the business case, right? You've got a ticket there that says we are enforcing that the SSHD configuration file looks like this. So if somebody goes in and manually breaks that,
They're violating the policy.
they're going outside the change control policy, but we have a record of it. It's like, oh, Puppet put this back. I mean, we don't necessarily have a record of who logged in, but we're also going to have other records, like somebody did log in. If you've got full auditing turned on, you know, like in Solaris, we've got BSM, I think Linux does the same thing, you know. There are records in syslog for every single file like that. I mean, if you really wanted to dig, you could do that, but yeah, it is changes the Puppet makes forward and changes the Puppet reverts are also going to be tied to the commit. Why we are managing that state, why it needs to be that way, and then, you know, the future work of going back to the business case.
So if somebody says, why was my change reverted, you can say, because the law, this is the reason it's supposed to be. If you want to challenge that, don't just SSH in and modify the file. Right.
So, yeah, we were able, I mean, at NetSmart, honestly, when I was looking at this giant mountain of procedures that we had, I thought we were going to have to hire, you know, 3 times as many people as we had. And that wasn't going to happen, so I thought I was going to have to do a third less work, or, you know, a third of the work that I was doing, because 2/3 of my day was going to be spent doing paperwork. But if you have linkages between all the different tools and a way to report on those linkages, then you can really turn that stuff around fast. You know, you're not spending your time doing grep and syslogs.
With Splunk, you can follow, you can find all Puppet operation on a single resource. You can say, okay, on this file, on this machine, what's happened with Puppet? On years if you want. So you can find someone changed file because you've got the line you say Puppet changed this file at this time, and Puppet say, okay, this file is changed, and I need to roll back the file. But with complex search in Splunk, you can find all the operation of Puppet on this resource.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Splunk, if you guys haven't checked out Splunk, I mean, I know a lot of, it is pretty cool. So it does a lot of stuff. All right, last question.
Okay, just a comment on the script to get the Git version.
Yep.
Did you check out the pretty option for git log?
I did not.
So what you can do is you can do git log dash n 1 and then
Git log -n1.
yeah, and I think that's space 1 space dash pretty, maybe dash pretty. And no, sorry. And then you have to go to format string. So like single quote ref.
Oh,
Yeah, you
we're
can say,
going to get a little deep here. Huh?
you can say ref equals %d, and just do that one for now. The dash dash. Let's see. Just a dash.
I'm gonna punt this question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Basically, you can. That's a one-liner. You Git has the ability to give it a format string, and it will give you back that information without having to have a little string.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah. I mean, the really nice thing I like about Git too is everything is just in flat files. So really, cat head. That's the current reference I'm on. And just copy that. Cat that. That's the commit I'm on. You don't even need to run Git commit. So okay. Any other questions?